accident in Chatsworth, they weren't even calling signals back and forth. Personally, I think the conductor should be charged with negligent homicide because he's the fail-safe right now. He's your positive train control. He's the ultimate arbiter of whether that train moves or stops. So here we have these conductors, and the engineer picks up the radio, goes right over green or whatever he says, right? And the conductor has to assume at that point that he is accurate because he's blind. He's a blind man, unless he could stick his head out the window or something like that.
Well, look, I don't want to debate.
Okay, here's what I think Metrolink should do.
Okay.
Okay. You already have these detectors, which are low-power radio transmitters. When the trains go by, they have a hot box. Why can't the signals send a message to the conductors as well? And with enunciators, when you start getting yellows and reds. When the train went by and it said yellow signal, warning, something like that, everybody would hear that. When I say everybody, the engineer and the conductor, the safety would be increased and the cost would be very minimal.
Well, I don't know about the cost being very minimal.
Low-power transmitters are not expensive.
But the signal systems aren't designed to do that. And number one, you know, that's not the way they were designed, not the way they were engineered. That's what PTC is about. PTC is to put the system in place that
even with PTC,
technology.
a system like that would be invaluable. What if PTC screwed up? You'd still have
it's
this.
got a redundant system. That's why it's a fail-safe system.
How many times have we heard fail-safe before in life?
I mean, you know, I don't want to debate the technology because it is the next best thing. I mean, it's going to change the railroad industry. It's like the automatic air brake. It's that big a deal. And you know, when you look at the technology and what it means, I mean, this literally takes it out of the hands of the engineer. And if it fails, what do you think it fails to? Now, does that mean there's never going to be any accidents? I mean, I can't help people who drive up on a right-of-way, but train-to-train collisions will go away. That'll happen. And I can give you a high degree of confidence that that will happen. Very high. And, you know, if you look at how do you manage train crews, I've been doing this a long time. You know, I came up in the operating department. And there is a whole series of things that goes on every day to ensure that those train crews do what they're supposed to be doing. And everything from, you know, the number of monitoring, we monitor those radios every day. We listen to train crews calling signals. We make sure that there's efficiency testing being performed, numbers and numbers and numbers. I can't ever justify what happened to Chatsworth. But I know from my experience as managing safety, employee behavior, there's a whole series of things that you do to ensure that people comply with rules. And it's a no compromise deal. If you're going to work for Metrolink, you're going to comply with rules because the stakes are too high. And if you're going to be a manager here, you're going to manage safety at a high level. And I guarantee you that I do a lot of things to ensure that those things take place every day. And, you know, unfortunately, until we get to that PTC, you do have a human element. And, you know, if you think about what happens, I've worked in the freight industry for a number of years where you had conductors and engineers on the head end of those trains, and they ran through red signals. So, you know, it's not, matter of fact, if you read what the NTSB says, if you read what a lot of the safety experts say, they believe that the system that we run today is safe and that there's a lot of distraction with putting two people in the cab. So, I mean, you know, there's a whole series of safety things that, do I think we're doing the best practices? Do I think that we're managing safety at a high level? Yes, I do.
No, unfortunately, I would have to disagree. Maybe one day
that's your opinion, and that's your decision whether you want. But I guarantee you, I have no problem putting my family on those trains. And if I felt that they were unsafe, I wouldn't put my grandchildren or my children or my wife on that train. And I don't feel that way.
Next question, Ken.
I'll laser, to use your term. In regards to using the $8 ticket, which I found out through emails was great. The guy at Wild at Work actually did everything with me over the phone, sent me emails, went to Kinko's, printed out everything. Everything was fine. But on my trip with others, I'll just talk about myself on the trip, we were going to San Bernardino and the others were going to go someplace else. I was going to go back on Metrolink and then go out to the valley on Metro at a party I was invited to. Before we got to Fontana, we have an announcement. The train is being stopped at Fontana because there's a broken rail. That was last Friday. I'm sure your operations people know all about it. I'm sure it's fixed by now.
Yep.
So they had already hired Inland Empire buses to take people on. So I, for myself, went back. We were a little bit late going back. And I called Bart to let him know what was going on. And I said, and he asked me a question. I don't know if this is standard procedure. We were at a Omni-Transit hub. Did they bring any water? And I said, no. All I know is that we're waiting to go back. It looked like we're going a little bit late. At least you'd arranged the buses. It was a fairly good area for transit connection. And just want to know, I said, Bart asked me, they bring the water. Is that standard procedure? That's my question.
Anytime we have a service interruption, that was one of the things that we instituted several months ago. If there is a service interruption and you're on that train and you're waiting for transit, we normally provide some kind of a snack and water.
I didn't know that until
yeah.
I talked to Bart.
And you know, we have, you know, all of our field service reps carry this stuff in their cars. We have it available. That's why if we didn't do it, I don't understand that, because that's usually normal protocol, is to offer water and a snack when people have been inconvenienced.
Thank you.
Sure. Question?
You have two new extensions starting up in the near future, one being Paris, and the other one that's, I don't know how far along that is. I know there's been some work done on that, which is the Redlands branch.
Right.
And are those on target for opening?
Paris Valley line is, and Redlands is still, you know, in the planning stage. Was that Avery?
Yeah, it's still, I think it's still in the conceptual
Yeah, it's
stage.
still in
We're
conceptual.
still walking through a lot of major design issues with sandbag on that.
But Paris Valley line is on target. So it should be, what, 2013 opening?
Yeah, they're still working through.
And what's the next future possible line in the LA basin?
I don't think there's anything that, you know, is anywhere near term. I mean, if I looked at what I think I think we have to start looking at adding capacity, double track, triple track. You know, we're slot constrained in some areas. Matter of fact, we were talking about the Orange County trains. I mean, we're maxed out with slots today. So one of the things that's going to happen is we're going to have to start looking at adding additional main line capacity. Because I think if we really get down to that point where we want to grow service, and I think Orange County is a classic example, we're going to have to look at being able to add train starts. And we're going to do that by adding capacity, track capacity. We've got a couple areas where we're pretty constrained right now.
Would Santa Barbara make any possible sense to Metrolink to extend a train?
Of course, that's, you know, that's serviced, of course, by Amtrak, certainly. I don't think there's a high ridership that would need more than what's provided by Amtrak today. And of course, that's a whole different discussion, what happens with Low-Sand Corridor. And there's actually a gentleman right now named Gene Starkowski that is looking at a Low-Sand Corridor service. And, you know, so I know there's a lot of people that are looking at that whole corridor and what happens with it. Sure.
Weekdays, your customer base is commuters back and forth. Weekends, is it daily trippers just going someplace?
I mean, yeah, it's you've got a combination of, you know, I think that we haven't marketed weekends very well, to your point. You know, that's where I think that this Thanksgiving deal was such a big deal. You know, I think that we're going to start to target the weekend. I mean, those are a lot of seats that are going unfilled. If there's anything that I think you'll see in the future is marketing to those day trips, giving some kind of a special fare that families could, you know, go where they need to go. Work, you know, we'd like to do some work with whether it's Magic Mountains of the world, and You know, I'd love to where you get your Metrolink ticket, can take your family, go up to the station, get off, they pick you up at our train station, you use your Metrolink ticket to get a discounted ticket fare. There's a whole series of things that we're going to take the weekend and really make that more event-driven and try to open up ridership and make it to where people can afford to go out and do things on the weekend. And I think that's a huge potential. And like I said, I'm glad to see the success of the Thanksgiving holiday, because if that's any indication, I think once we start to program that with some of these other event destinations, I think that's going to be a huge deal.
The Angels.
Angels.
That's one of your stops.
Angels, Dodgers, you know, there's so many things that we're going to reach out and try to partner with. I think it's a big opportunity.
How important do you think situational awareness and employee honesty is?
I think it's very important.
Both.
Very, yes.
You have a question?
I'm just curious, you know, the winds out of Washington right now, talking about the next federal bill, or talking about cutting money for transit, for pretty much all areas of transportation, but transit seems to be on the chopping block if you listen to what some of the incoming leaders are saying. I'm just curious about what your level of engagement as an organization is, and how well you're coordinating, and what you're hearing as well on your end.
Well, I think that, you know, I go back to what I said from the beginning. I think it's important that you manage what you have well. And, you know, when I go back to Washington, the first thing I always talk about is what I would describe as self-help. And you know, coming from the private sector, I'm used to trying to figure out how you make do with what you have. How do you unlock the potential of what you run? And, you know, I talk a lot about, you think about what 20,000 riders would mean to our financial viability. You think about, when you lay out the options, do you want to build freeways? Do you want to build, you know, what's the cheapest cost of capacity increases? You know, you got to start to frame the argument for the politicians and the elected officials. And if you can sit down and make a good case, I think money's going to be very difficult to compete with. And I think you've got to have a compelling story of what you're doing. And I mean, it's just a fact of life. I mean, money is tighter than it's ever been. And I think that you have to be smart about how you run these and how you're going to do things to ensure that when you do have a need, whether it was PTC, we got funding, whether it's the equipment that we just purchased, I think there's always good justification, but you got to have the business case and the facts to support it. Yeah, well.
I'm trying to make this into a question, but in today's Times, there actually was a story about the 91 freeway and the manner that they managed to get another lane out of the freeway. A freeway, basically 1 mile of freeway carries about 200 cars, and they extended the freeway. So now they can store another 500, 800 cars an hour. What wasn't part of the argument or the story was, where does Metrolink fit in with the 91, and how can we, and you as the leader, get into framing that argument and taking control? I mean, a lane of freeway doesn't take much capacity. It moves 600, 800 people an hour. People don't understand that, you know, that's hardly anything.
Right.
But it's billions of dollars.
Well, and I think, you know, I mean, part of what I've been trying to do is to get out the message. You know, I've tried to spend a lot of time with elected officials to get them to understand what kind of an asset Metrolink is. And, you know, they have a lot on their plate. You know, if you're an elected official, you've got a lot of things that you're dealing with. And I think the way you change things in this world is through education and fact. And if you can sit down and educate people as to why, you know, I'll sit down and, to me, it's not about, it's about who has the best reasoning and the logic. You have the best logic, you should get the funding. If you have the best logic, that should be a part of the discussion, because I think that's what people demand. I think they want elected officials to make good decisions based upon fact that's cost efficient. And I think my job is to make sure that I educate people as to what I think are the benefits of Metrolink